I think organizational design primarily, if you're running an org, is about lines of communication and lines of command.
Today we're going to talk all about organizational design, how to build your organization the correct way, looking at what different teams need to do at different points, making sure you don't do a generic approach, and look at how to get the right people into the right roles, especially at your different phases between scaling, growing, figuring things out, and so much more. And we're really honored today to have with us Omid Ashtari, who's got an incredible wealth of experience. He was the COO and a board director at Streetbees. He was a president and head of business at CityMapper. And he's done so much more than that and invested in over 40 companies as an angel investor. So this is somebody who's been through all those different stages, helped so many companies to do what they need to do in order to get to where they want to be. So let's get into the show. So Omid, for people listening who aren't familiar with organizational design, what it's all about, maybe they've started their company, but they're not really sure about how they're going to scale it. What do you mean by organizational design and why is it important?
Yeah, no, I think the main thing to consider, by the way, is that I'm going to look at this as a lens from a startup perspective, right? I'm not talking about a 10,000 person organization or anything. And I think organizational design primarily, if you're running an org, is about lines of communication and lines of command, right? The lines of command are relevant to be designed well for decision making. That is important for any given thing that you need to do within that business unit or that organizational function. And then the lines of communication is important to get right because of reporting and alignment and a strategy and vision. So organizational design is about how do you design these different parts of the functions of an organization well to fit the purpose of what the organization is actually trying to achieve, rather than, just coming up with some sort of random mishmash that is divorced from the reality of what needs to be done.
I think it's interesting about how soon that can become a problem. So we've got me and my co-founder, we've got a few other people working for us as well, but it's a handful of people. But it's so easy for us to build systems to make it easy for us to give the direction. But then maybe the other way, things aren't quite right. And it's a really teething issue very quickly. And I think a lot of people early in business, they overestimate how easy it is to run a business and to manage people in that way. And you kind of always hit that stop quite early. And in your own experience, what made you fascinated with this? Like, why did you start to really think about the way these teams ran?
Yeah, you see, I find most business problems, I'm kind of not a business scholar, academic or something like that, because my belief fundamentally is that businesses are a creative endeavor where people come together, right? And it's unique people in their unique stage in life with unique incentives that they have outside of work, with unique wants and needs. Then you're operating within an industry, right? And that is a very particular industry. Again, at that point in time, the industry has certain dynamics that are going on. And then you may be building on a platform that has certain dynamics at that point in time, say early Facebook, social gaming distribution era. It's very different than building something on it now. So I think there's so many different things at play at any given point in time that you need to be really thoughtful about how you're actually building anything at any given point. And general advice is probably not useful. So the way I think about this stuff is more frameworks that you should figure out whether it can be applied to your business in particular or not. And that's why, even if you're, as you say, at your stage, it was like 6 people sitting together at a table, is like, what are the questions I should be asking here to consider whether I can adapt some of the things that I'm doing to work better, right? And I think one thing is, for instance, if you think about it, it's like, is the work that you're doing very repeatable, or are you trying to figure out new things to improve or to develop what you're trying to do? And those two things are very different in the nature of how you need to think about stuff, how you need to operate, what processes you need, what people should be on those problems, etc. So that's kind of at the core of figuring out a good organizational design that is specific to the actual problems that you're solving rather than generic across the organization, if that makes sense.
So what you mentioned there as well about not doing things generic across organizations. Is there any kind of buckets you'd put people in within an organization that should act in different ways?
Yeah, totally. I guess often what you don't want is your lawyer to be super audacious and creative, for instance, right? So there's certain functions that come with a specific bias in terms of conservatism. I would say maybe Travis Kalanick actually said, no, I want my lawyers to be audacious and totally crazy and creative, right? Because he wanted to hack his way through city regulations. It depends, obviously, again, on your organization. But I think by and large, legal, finance are more conservative areas of business. So there, you're essentially, want to hire people that have that are comfortable or that are good at reporting vast amounts of data in a condensed way, and do so in a timely fashion, be also able to communicate well. But what you don't want is them to be super excited by creative, remit and reach and being able to like experiment at other things, right? So it has something to do with hiring. It has something to do with your setup. But again, all these rules are there to be broken. Maybe you're an organization that wants to exactly do that. If you work at Binance, I think you really want to have creative finance people because you have so many different special purpose vehicles across the world in Cayman and other jurisdictions because you're trying to obfuscate what's going on.
I don't know if you saw the news recently where maybe they're a bit too creative. I think they got done for fraud, didn't they?
Yes, I know.
Or
CZ's out. CZ's out.
So looking at that then, let's say with other functions, so you're building out, you've got teams that are scaling. And one of the things I think is really difficult, you're trying to build the company and trying to grow, but at the same time, the bottom not falling out, right? And not things going crazy. How do you adjust that? Because I think at the top, it's so easy to try and make things as simple as you can for yourself, which can then sometimes cause chaos underneath you. How do you adjust that? How do you have different models? Or what different models can people use beyond, say, conservative and more audacious? What are some of the frameworks that people can use?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think, again, I'm sorry if this is not super comprehensive. It's a model that I've come up with my own experience. And I'm sure there are people who are academic scholars of business that have better frameworks here. Mine is simple. I would say there are three different kind of parts to an organization, or where I would say you want to adapt the operating system to fulfill the need of that kind of part of the organization. One that I would say is the figure outer, right? That's kind of when you're faced with a new problem that the organization needs to figure out that is business critical. And that part of the organization needs to operate slightly differently. I'll go back to it. I'll go through the three areas first. Then I think there's something that we call business as usual, right? What you, for instance, don't want is your customer support team to completely be all over the place, because what you want to have as a customer is like a consistent experience, a reliable experience, an experience that, doesn't change from tomorrow to today to tomorrow. So that is a business as usual problem, I would say. Consistency. Of course, there's still optimization that occurs in this space, and you're trying to figure out some things here too, how to be leaner, how to be more efficient, how to do things. But it's very different from the figure outer where you have no clue how you're solving any given problem, right? And then there's the third bucket that I would call, that I've experienced, is called the scaling bucket. And there, it's very clear what the problem is. And that is, we want to achieve a certain thing as fast as possible. But we know exactly what we want to achieve. So it's actually the opposite than the figure out. You're not trying to figure out what's going on. We know exactly what we want to achieve, but we want to do it super fast. So that's a different mindset as well. So these are the three rough buckets, and we can go through each of them if you want, and then kind of maybe think about what kind of people and processes are required for them to run well. Is that a good structure?
Yeah, one thing I might pick on first is the business as usual side, because weirdly, I find that maybe the toughest, because the figure outers is the exciting bit, right? Scaling is the exciting bit. The business as usual, as a founder, can sometimes be the bit which you always leave last because it's less sexy, right? And what I found, my own mistakes that I've made, is that I try to get the business as usual going without really building systems to support that. And then you have constant problems all the time. So looking at that business as usual part, how do you design that area effectively?
Yes. I think business as usual, you're right. Like, it's not the sexiest part of the organization. And I personally have a bias for the new shiny thing, right? And, I don't want to deal with the stuff that's really boring and all that. But actually, that's sometimes quite mission critical to run the business well. You need to know your runway. You need to know your burn rate. You need to, make sure that you do the trademarks in the right places. You need to make sure that your customer support team is working well. You want to make sure that your operations team is trying to become more efficient, etc. Right? These are things that on the surface seem boring, but at the same time, if you can cut costs, if you can become more efficient, are super important because it enables the creative stuff to do more cycles and learn more and try to do other stuff. So on the business as usual side, it's good that and I know that we have a bias, right? Our bias is we want the shiny thing. And so the first question always is like, we're all monkeys. We all have a motivational system. We all have our biases, right? Be aware of your own bias and know what's going on. And based on, if you know you have a bias, then you have to be doubly vigilant to work against that bias, right? So for me, it's very important for me to set the lines of communication and the lines of command up in a way that is prompting me rather than me prompting it. So what does that mean? It means that, for instance, there has to be like a Monday morning report that comes in from the finance team about how have the costs and revenue changed over the last week or month or whatever the right period is in that specific case. What were the reasons why this happened, right? We landed a new customer. Our AWS bill was a little bit higher this time because we launched a new city. I'm using a CityMapper example here. So these are kind of things that you need to get into your inbox. And what you need then is you need to have a meeting that's scheduled that you can't get out of, that you force yourself to go in and have this conversation. So this is kind of the process that comes with a line of communication. And then the line of command is having that meeting and having any decisions that need to be made in that meeting, right? So you're forcing yourself to do that. What you also want is, again, we talked about that briefly, hire people that are comfortable with that type of pace and with that type of process and with that type of communication, that they're okay with the template that they send out every Monday and that they do the work on the Friday to make sure that that template is right and they have the right way of communicating around it, and that they're capable enough in a meeting when I'm asking 15 questions because I want to get to the bottom of it, being able to actually on the spot dig into the data and give me the answers and all that. So it's about the hiring. It's about the, attitude and kind of predispositions of the people and their biases in some way that you want to get them into. And then it's about the design.
Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying this episode so far. The Bay HQ has a podcast, but we're so much more than that. So if you want to find out about all of the events we've got going on, all the different ways you can meet each other, as well as resources to help you build the business of your dreams, then check out the link in the show notes, sign up to our newsletter, where you get a weekly roundup, which we like to call the Bay Letter, that will keep you in the loop. If you want to help us out, the best thing you can possibly do is sign up to our newsletter and share it with your friends. So that's enough from me now. Let's get back to the show. I think that's really interesting what you said there as well. It's hiring the right people for those kind of roles, because what I think some people say this, so you always want to hire people who want to be entrepreneurs themselves, right? That's one of their philosophies for themselves. But the challenge is that if you hire somebody to do a type of role which is against what they're excited by or what gets them out of bed, then there's going to be friction sooner or later.
Absolutely.
And somebody who wants to be an entrepreneur, for example, they might take that role and I get to work with somebody who's amazing. But then if you're just going to get frustrated, you end up being in this awkward situation where you're not happy, the person who's hired you isn't happy, and it's actually better to say no. And I think sometimes people don't understand themselves well enough to know when they should say no. And I've said no recently to a role where somebody wanted to hire me, and I said it's too much of a role which isn't going to align with the kind of autonomy and everything I have now. And I'm not really it's a great opportunity, but it's not right for me. And I think it's both sides, right? You said, right? It's the employee knowing this is a role that suits them, and the employer sometimes not trying to pick somebody who they can think they can mold into that role, because often it's not going to work, right?
I think that you're absolutely right, and it totally resonates with me what you're saying. And I think you can't expect that the person that you're hiring as a business or as an employer, that they know what they want to do with their life. It's about you figuring out what they want to do with their life. I think the most important questions that I ask in any given interview, and I've probably interviewed more than 700 people in my life, or even probably more. What their motivation is in life is kind of what you need to get to first and foremost, right? And what they've been driven by. I know that sounds super soft and cliche, but I really ask them, like, if they allow me and if they're okay, I just ask them, hey, look, what was your relations with your parents like? Why did you choose that thing that you chose? Why did you leave this job? And why did you join this job? How did you get that job? What was the reason that you left that company? All these things kind of give you a sense of the value system and the way people think. And then, you may make mistakes, and I've done many mistakes in my life, made a lot of mistakes in my life in hiring. And the thing to remember there then is that the interview ends with a probation period. That means that don't think that because you've hired someone, they're now in the organization, because somebody that is, especially in a senior role in an organization for a prolonged period of time, that is misaligned or has a motivation issue or is poisoning the well, will create so much damage for your organization that, taking the first 3 months in the probation period, whatever long that may be, and really assessing them and actually being thoughtful about what are the things that they need to achieve in these 3 months before they actually start. Set goals, make sure they communicate it to them, and ensure that, somebody is responsible for reporting upwards about that progress of that person, and also staying on top of it and coaching them to make sure that you give them a good shot to get to that level. And if you don't manage to do that right, then that's your own fault. So I don't blame anyone for not knowing what they want to do in life or what their value system is. All that, it's my job to find out. It's the organization's job to find out, because the organization is going to bear the cost of it if it doesn't.
And so you mentioned the other two sides there as well, right? So the figure outers and the scalers. Do you have which one is the most exciting for you, or you're not allowed to say for when you're hiring people in the future? You don't want them to realize who your favorites are.
Hey, the people are all my favorites. It's not about the people. It's probably more. Yeah, I think I gravitate more to the figure outers. I'm more like an early stage type person, and I like the 0 to 1 or 1 to 10 journey rather than the 100 to 1,000 journey. But I really appreciate the 100 to 1,000 people and their skill set. They have a very, very good skill set, and I think it's a very valuable skill set, right? If you've scaled something like that. So I would gravitate towards the figure outers. And they're very different in compared to the business as usual. Business as usual was said, hey, look, you have a set meeting, you have a set way of communicating. There's like a template for like how the reporting is done. You know exactly what kind of people you want. You want people who are good with existing information and processes. The figure outers, on the other hand, the most important thing when you're hiring people for that is people who are okay with ambiguity. People who thrive in environments that are wide open, where you have to somehow be very proactive about creating what is going on. People who have an action bias. People who are actually really good at communicating. People who drive on chaos. Because with a figure outer, say we were going to figure out the go-to-market strategy for our B2B SaaS company, right? And we're trying to kind of figure out, hey, which marketing channel works? Is this kind of inside sales strategy working and all that? We need to have conversations as soon as there's any question that is open. We can't wait for the next week where that meeting is scheduled for us to have a conversation. No, I want people to interrupt me. I want them to ask me what we need to do at any given point in time. While I do think that like business as usual and probably scalers are more run by committee, I think figure outers are actually very much top down, because it sounds a bit weird, but you need to have somebody that just tells other people what to do. You want all the information, you want alignment, and you want a team of people who are okay to disagree and commit. And the goal is to make as many failures or as many mistakes as possible, to learn as fast as possible about the stuff that you're doing. Let's run LinkedIn campaigns and see how people are reporting. Oh, okay, this is not going to work out well. Okay, you know what? Let's do a seminar that is a webinar that people can log into. Thereby, we qualify the leads, and that's going to cost us X. And then we do a little bit of content that gets them into, and then they're primed, and then we can actually convert them to like actual qualified leads. It said, let's try things out very quickly. Learn from very little data, and then try to kind of find the next part of the experiment and the next part of the experiment. And let's do this as fast as possible, because we can't be faffing around and costing the organization a lot of money by doing that. And if it's like mission critical, you really, the only benefit that you have over corporates is exactly this, being able to be flexible and learn and squeeze as many cycles of learning through as little time as possible. Because they have a lot more resources, they have a lot more people. That's what you're good at. So that's what you really need to then focus. And it does require people who are also a little bit unemotional about their strategy being shot down, or like, then a decision or a failure being made and then moving on. And, I was invested in this strategy. We went all this way and like now we're shutting it down. No problem. Let's move on. It's about making the organization better, not my specific emotions or my idea or me claiming a win here. So there are a few things that you need to take into consideration, I guess, with the figure outers.
What I say as well, I don't know if this resonates, about you need that delusional optimism to keep trying things. And then if you fail, you just ignore it. You learn the lesson from it, but then get really optimistic about something else. So it's that ability to fail and get optimistic again, fail, be optimistic again. And it's resilience to that, right? You've got to have the resilience of, you can still get excited and still be like, oh, this could be the thing that's going to work, and put your energy behind it. And when it fails, be like, oh, okay, let's do something else now. And I think it's really hard to explain that to people sometimes as well, but that attitude. And how do you find those people?
It's a good question. I think for most of the part, when you're interviewing people, what you want is you want to ask behavioral questions, right? You don't want to ask open-ended questions. And actually, I think the most interesting questions are human questions. They're not like, oh, okay, tell me how you optimize X, Y, Z. Or by the way, I have to put this into perspective. For the most part, I'm not the first interviewer. I'm like maybe third or fourth interviewer. And actually, the first interviewer should do a role-related knowledge check, right? Or, sometimes it's not about role-related knowledge, but general cognitive ability, right? And those are the checks that happen before somebody ends up in front of me in an interview. And I think it's okay. I will definitely do some general cognitive ability check and role-related knowledge check, because I want to make sure that, the bar is right and we've calibrated well, especially if it's a new role. And, my teammates haven't really figured out what the bar should be for a person to kind of be good enough. Then I do ask a lot more role-related knowledge and general cognitive ability. But I think for the most part, it's about these type of things that you're pointing out. It's like, tell me about a moment where you were failing, and how did you recover from that? What were some of the tools that you used to get yourself out of that funk? And how did you communicate that to your parents, to your friends? How many times again did you try, to actually get that thing going? Did you give up, or, did you move on? All these type of things. So for instance, if you see somebody that is like moving from one organization to the next every year, maybe they were just actually failing at every point in their job. And 1 year was exactly the amount of time it took for the organization to figure out that this person's not good enough. Right. And like, you need to figure this type of stuff out. Right. And if maybe they also just, didn't do a good job in understanding, and maybe they didn't learn from their failures in the organization, clearly, otherwise they would have excelled over time. So these are just things that you figure out by asking very direct human questions. I find very often that we try to be too academic. Ultimately, everything on this planet is human to human, and humans have, the same desires. We want love, we want appreciation, we want acceptance. There are these things. So you need to figure those things out about the people that you're going to work very closest with in a very high stress, high stakes environment, which is startup world, because the clock is ticking, the burn is running out, the burn is burning like the runway away. So you really need to have people who are resilient and fast and can do all this with a lot of stress. You want to figure that out. So I don't know if that was the right answer to your question, but
no, definitely. And last but not least, the scalers, right? So tell us about the scalers. What do they bring to the table? What kind of people are they? How do you design an organization effectively for the scalers?
If you think about it, right, the figure outers, what you actually want, and I know it's maybe a bit counterintuitive, is you don't want people that necessarily have that much role-related knowledge. You don't want people who have a preconceived notion about how to do specific things. Because if you have that, then you're coming with baggage. And if you want to figure something out and reinvent something or invent something to begin with, the beginner's mindset is best. So sometimes actually more junior people are good in the figure outer bucket, just people who are good, who you can just accept what's going on. They trust, they have the energy, they're resilient. They love all this because they're thriving and learning. Somebody with a big ego that has a lot of experience may not be okay with that type of work. Like, but I've done this many times before. Why didn't you listen to my... On the other hand, when you want to do the scalar stuff, actually what you want is people with a lot of role-related knowledge. So, I always say in the beginning of a startup journey, what you want to hire for is mission fit, and you want to hire for like energy and like, probably not so many senior people at the beginning. I know there's like a cognitive dissonance. A lot of people want to hire like the CFO and the CMO and the CRO and all that in the beginning. No. Hire a bunch of junior people, coach them, and try to kind of figure out, do all the C-level jobs yourself, try to figure out what you actually need to hire for and what these problems are. And by the way, that's the only way you learn. But later on, if you're scaling something, actually you want to have somebody that has a lot of role-related knowledge. For instance, internationalizing a sales organization is a very tried and tested skill set that some people have done already. And they know what bonus systems work. They know exactly how they need to set up like motivational kind of structures. They know how to run these. They know how to build a sales pipeline. They know how to do the lead gen on these things, right? And so you want somebody that has done that for, I don't know, 3-4 times in other startups. Maybe they failed a couple of times. Maybe this time they're not going to fail. But you want somebody that comes in that is plug and play, right? Knows exactly what they do. And what you want is you want to incentivize them on a very clear structure and goals that you set, because you know what you want. You want to have X amount of sales from North America by at the end of the year, right? So that's what you set them for a goal, and they know exactly what the job is, and you tell them to do it the fastest way possible, right? That's basically what you want. High role-related knowledge. They know exactly what they want to do. They just need to learn how to apply themselves to your organization, not to the problem at hand as such. So this is crucially different from the figure outer, because the figure outer is like, beginner's mindset. I don't need you to come with any baggage. I want all your baggage and roll in scalar, and I want you to just run, and I want you to execute very clear targets. Figure outers, we don't even know what we want at this point, So I think that's one of the crucial differences, if that makes sense.
I guess one of the hard things for founders of scalers must be, if there's people come with such high domain knowledge, do you ever see instances where that ego comes into play, where the founders or the leaders feel threatened by somebody coming in who's senior, who knows what they're talking about, who might be like, well, your idea isn't actually the right thing because I've done this at 10 other places and this is the right process? And how have you seen that dynamic, and what can founders think about to make sure that doesn't happen to them?
100%. You nailed it. I mean, I think this is something that's very common, actually. And, again, I feel these are human things. I know I sound like a broken record. You need to kind of ensure that the people that you're hiring understand that sometimes, and this only works if you have a good track record, right? Say you've built a company that, just raised 40 million from tier 1 VC, right? You're doing something right? And sometimes if somebody comes in and they have some sort of experience that is currently lacking in an organization that they're bringing to the organization, and they now think they have all the answers and they want to do it exactly the way they want, well, that may not work for the founder of that organization, because you know what? We respect and accept that you have a lot of domain knowledge, but there are ways we think you need to tweak your approach to our specific business. And what you don't want is somebody that does not have enough flexibility to negotiate that with you, right? And sometimes it's good that somebody maybe pushes you away from some of your preconceived notions as a founder. And you should be open to that too. You should be open to grow and accept that. But what you need to ensure is also that you have talked to that person and say, hey, look, we do things a little bit differently here. I don't want you to get frustrated after a month or two when we don't do exactly the playbook that you've done 3 times before. Because one, you maybe have to drag me along on this journey and sometimes prove me wrong. But I want you to understand that this is going to be something that is going to happen in unison between you and me. And this is negotiation. This is not you just do what, and I think this has to be upfront. I think if you communicate these things upfront, that's fine. And ultimately, it's very natural that these things may go wrong. And again, then you just have to ensure, especially with senior hires, that there is no bad blood, that, they kind of feel like, okay, there's a or there's a misalignment here in the way, you're envisioning this. You send them off sooner rather than later, right? And you do this in a way that doesn't damage the culture or makes them feel bad about their experience as a company, because what you don't want is a bunch of senior people that you've go run around and talk bad things about your organization, right? So it's about handling that in a very above board way.
Yeah, so really enjoyed this. We're gonna have to close off now because of time and go to the quickfire questions, but definitely getting going again. It's been really fun, and I know that you've got so many other areas that you know so much about too. So this isn't the end. So first quickfire question is, who are 3 British Asians that you'd love to shout out that you think are doing incredible work and the audience should be paying attention to?
I'm on the business advisory board of the mayor, and Sadiq is I really appreciate him. I know sometimes people are moaning about the ULIS or this or that, but he's such an upright kind of standing politician that's always been consistent in the way he's approached politics, which I really appreciate in the era of people changing allegiances all the time. The second one would be Reshma Sohni. I really, I'm in awe in our achievements that she's done with Seed Camp, as a hugely inspiring person, and, love hanging out with her also personally. She's just fun. And I guess in the same realm would be Sonali, again, as a female brown person rising to the top height of being a tier 1 VC at Accel. Amazing investments and amazing track record. So those would be my 3 shout outs.
Awesome. So if people want to learn more about you and what you're up to, where should they go to?
Best place is probably go to start.pragmatism.com. It's kind of my hub for business related things. I also have a blog called thefullspectrum.blog. That's more about the human condition and philosophizing about reality.
And sign up to his Substack as well. So is there anything right now that the audience could help you with? So somebody listening right now, they could reach out to you and help you with something.
Yeah, I told you, I think before, that I'm working on a podcast. So anybody who's good at editing or has some ideas around how to do a podcast well, and I'd love to guest post on other blogs if people have blogs that they're kind of interested in doing in a post exchange. Love that too. So those would be a couple of things.
Great to have you on. Have you got any final words for the audience?
Look, I think this startup thing is hard. Always remember other people have done it, and don't be shy in reaching out to them, because that's the only way really how all of civilization has been built, by people being kind to others and helping them out in the moment of need. And if you feel like any of this resonated, feel free to reach out to me on various channels that you can find me on.
Hello everyone. Thank you so much for listening. It means a huge amount to us, and we don't think you realize how important you are, because if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, if you leave us a 5-star review, it makes a world of difference. And if you believe in what we're trying to do here, to inspire, connect and guide the next generation of British Asians, if you do those things, you can help us achieve that mission, and you can help us make a bigger impact. And by doing that, it means we can get bigger guests, we can host more events, we can do more for the community. So you can play a huge part. So thank you so much for supporting us.